I wanted to bring this up for you guys. I don't know if you saw this new 100 and some odd page thing that was released, this new Jack Smith argument here. And we have more details in there that we didn't know previously. I wanted to bring up some of these for you guys. So I mean, this stuff, I still get astonished, even at this late date, knowing what the conversations were behind the scenes in MAGA land when they were trying to steal the election. So one of the things that stood out to me is that Trump and his advisors all knew about this thing called the red mirage scenario. That it's going to look like you're winning because they're going to count the votes on election day first. Then when the mail-in votes come in, Biden is going to start surging and he could very well eclipse you.
I remember you blew Joe Rogan's mind with that.
I know, yeah. Joe, whoa, bro, really? So they knew this. Trump knew it. And then, more details come out and they go on to explain, like, basically, we don't care. So Roger Stone was telling Trump, go out there and declare victory anyway. Trump was like, right on, let me do that. There's one part where talking about January 6th internally, here's a quote from one of them, quote, make them riot. Make them riot. So they wanted the January 6th riot. They wanted violence on that day. When Trump was already told Mike Pence had to be this is all new, yeah. Mike Pence was taken to a secure location. He reportedly said on the, hang Mike Pence thing, he was like, he deserves it. That was something we learned in the past. Now we learned one of the things he said was, so what? When they told him he had to be taken. Yeah, he was being evacuated. He was still putting out anti-Mike Pence tweets he didn't have the courage to do. He was still saying that. This was after he knew they were chanting hang Mike Pence. This is after they already had to try to take him away to a secure location, right? And then they also go on to say, and I quote, the details don't matter about whether or not he won the election.
Was actually
right. And so I think
Pence
Jack Smith
sat him down too and was like, you need to, you can run again in 2024. You got to accept this loss. And he was like, 2024 is a long way away.
So these details prove that there was intent there. He knew he didn't win. There was intent there to try to block the certification of the election, which is effectively disenfranchising millions and millions of voters, right? And I don't see how it's arguable at this point. So my question for you guys is, given these facts, do you have any faith that in the court system, they could actually get his ass? Because the fear now is at the Supreme Court, they go, you basically have total immunity for anything that could remotely be considered in your, official duties as president. You know what I'm saying? So will they say, sorry, but I think this falls under official duties, or will they say clearly you were acting outside of official duties and therefore you did commit a crime? What do you think, Gavin?
Ooh, I mean, that's tough. I tend to think he'll probably get away with it as usual with Donald Trump. I tend to. I'm also a little bit confused on the timeline here. Is this the one where the sentencing is going to come down after the election, right?
Yes.
The trial hasn't even happened though. This is the Jack Smith election interference.
So this is a brand new indictment.
It's not
it's not a new indictment.
This filing is in the context of the Jack Smith charges with regard to election obstruction, blocking a federal government proceeding, whatever the specific charges were. And the timeline had been pushed back so that the trial doesn't start until after the election. And this filing was in the context of that Supreme Court decision saying that you have effectively blanket immunity for any quote unquote official acts. And so the government had to put in a new filing to argue like these were not official acts.
Okay. Yeah.
And
so
here's the evidence and here's the details of why these were private acts in service of his own private interest, had nothing to do with official duties. So that's what this filing is about.
So they dropped some of the charges that were in the original case in D.C. from Jack Smith, but they still have most of the same charges are there, and they say these are not official duties. And so this is a new document relative to that. But to your point, yes, we get the answer. This is all presuming Trump loses, that we get any sort of conclusion on this, because this is all for after the election. But if he does lose, and we get to the point where it's after the election, I mean,
he could go
this
down.
Could bring him, he could go down. He could go down.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a jury not deciding that he's guilty based on the facts that you laid out. But obviously, who knows what Trump's defense would come up with. What do you think, Zach?
Man, it's one of those things. It's so tough. How many times could somebody have sat in a chair on a podcast and said into the microphone, guys, this time it's over for Donald Trump? Like, how many times can you say that?
Yeah.
It's different this time. This is a smoking gun. You know what I mean? So taking that, be that as it may, right? Like, I mean, 6 years, 7 years. I mean, even before Trump got into the office, it was, he's already committed so many crimes that are going to disqualify him, right? So my instinct is to say, even if if he wins this election, it's over, guys. He's going to appoint 5 Supreme Court justices over the time that he's been in office. It's going to be a conservative majority for until we die. It's going to be really horrible. Not to fearmonger, but I'm just telling you the Supreme Court is completely cooked if Donald Trump gets reelected, and he's going to use it to scapegoat all of his crimes. So assuming he wins, he's off scot-free. There's absolutely nobody on planet Earth that could touch this man. He'll be good until he dies, probably 15 years max because of his unhealthy lifestyle. Okay, so he could definitely fight it for that long. That's the other thing, that this guy's old. He's really old, and his health is deteriorating. So I think 15 years max. You have to imagine he would exhaust every resource he has on appeals, on fighting this, on making it look political. I think best case scenario, this guy gets house arrest at Mar-a-Lago, but you never see him in an orange jumpsuit. He's a former president of the United States. Like it or not, I definitely don't like it. We just don't prosecute presidents in this country. If you become president, you're going to get off scot-free. It doesn't matter how publicly we've caught you committing crimes. Richard Nixon proved that.
Yeah.
Do you think, if he loses, do you think that there's ever any chance that, the Republican obsession with this man and love for him, is there anything that will ever break that until he's dead?
Oh, no, it will.
If he loses
I think it's already
again,
happening.
that they'll be like, maybe it's time we move on?
I do think I agree with Zach. I think it's already happening. We see it with the Nick Fuentes people abandoning Donald Trump. Why? Because it's no longer cool to be a Trump supporter. The whole appeal of Donald Trump in the first place, and the reason why he was such a hot item in 2016 to me, is because before then, there was nothing less cool than being a Republican. The whole Mitt Romney era, the John McCain and George Bush era, it was just no one wants to be a Republican. All of a sudden, Trump makes it cool again with the memes and, definitely not my definition of cool, but in a sense, he made it edgy. It's kind of feel contrarian, anti-establishment, kind of punk rock. I remember there's that really cringy tweet that was conservatism is the new punk rock. And
he got the Sex Pistols endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. But now that's all gone. That's all gone. Now it's just this weird, kind of old man thing. And it's also just the Republican establishment too. So it's not something that I think is going to survive, because now it's the establishment's going to want to buck Trump. They're going to want to shake him like fleas, shake MAGA off. But also, I think a lot of even just the grassroots supporters, they're going to get to the point where they're we just miss winning.
Yeah.
Zach, what do you think about?
Like.
I keep seeing these. Let's talk about the man aspect of this. I keep seeing these polls that are Gen Z, still overall supports Democrats, but Gen Z men have moved some to the right. There's these huge
but what are the numbers on that?
Gender gaps. I don't know off the top of my head.
70-30?
But no, it's closer than that with young men.
60-40?
I mean, I think
it's a 25% margin.
I do feel like there has been, that gender gap. It is a real thing. There is still some sense among certain subsets of young men that Donald Trump is the cool, edgy thing to do. And so do you think that wears off? Do you think that is just specific to Donald Trump and won't translate to the rest of the Republican Party? What do you think that's a real phenomenon? What do you think's going on there?
What I think a lot of it has to do with this. So for people who young people, honestly, it's easy to sit back and, go either direction, right? Oh, it's so hard to be a young person. Oh, it was so, much, harder to be a young person when I was a young person, right? But the reality is right now we have a very, a hyper-capitalized society, right? Where most people, depending on where you live, they probably live with their parents. They probably live in a multi-generational household. Gavin and I were really lucky. We have friends. We have our own community. We have our own place to live. We live a very unique existence for Midwestern 26-year-olds. We've been lucky that way. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't get to kick it with their boys all day long. A lot of people don't have a community of boys to kick it with, friends to kick it with, all that kind of stuff. And I think that wears on people, that isolates people, and they get driven towards nefarious, parasocial relationships online. It's one of the reasons that Gavin and I like doing our show the way we like to do it, because instead of taking on the role of a lecturing body that's going to give you our take from up here, we're just one of you watching the content. You're one of us, but you get to still be a lefty with homies that get to watch the content with us. And I think that's a big appeal of what the right-wing movement has been. They were outcasts. They were we're going to lean into how much society rejects us. Who does society also reject? Donald Trump. But he's not going to be the hot commodity forever. He's not going to be the whatever the pie in the sky. He's going to retire and he's going to become irrelevant. And if the left is able to mobilize, we'll get a lot of those kids back Bernie Sanders style. Gavin and I talk about this all the time. When we were 18, 17, it was cool to support Bernie Sanders. It was like a big rift between the Bernie kids and the Donald Trump kids. And Gavin and I were like hardcore Bernie bros. Gavin was the chief Bernie bro of the Johnson County metropolitan area, multiple years running. But the thing is it's like you can kind of capture that. Oh, I'm lost. I don't want to be a loser. I don't have any friends. I don't have direction. The world is too expensive for me. My parents can't pay for me to go to college. And all my friends that can go to college are telling me that my life is going to be fucking ruined because community college is where dreams go to die, right? This is all the shit that we heard, growing up in Flyover America. And if you're not one of the kids that's able to, catch the next wave and get out, you do feel like a reject. You do feel like a loser. You feel like your life's not going anywhere and you want to blame it on somebody else. And so you start taking Percocets, you start hitting the bottle and you become a Fox News viewer. And that's what happens to people younger and younger and younger and younger. And instead of becoming a Fox News viewer, you become a guy that watches, Fresh and Fit Twitch streams where it's all about more plates, more dates. Like women are commodities. Oh, if I get money, then I can buy and consume people. And that kind of, mentality leads to like right-wing philosophy.
Well, what do you make of this new weird thing, rather pathetic thing, if you ask me? This whole nexus of post-leftists who have now sort of gotten together with MAGA, but they insist, oh no, we're a little different, but also we're going to go do events that like sort of prop up MAGA. Of course, I'm thinking about, you got your Tulsi Gabbard, you got your RFKs, you got your Russell Brands, you got your Jimmy Dores, you got this Brett Weinstein, he was never a leftist, but like, this Rescue the Republic. I'm sure you guys saw that. And it's this very strange thing that happened. And I can't help but say, to me, it looks like these people are rushing to get a ticket and hop on the Titanic right before it hits the iceberg, right? Yeah. Like and when these people had plausible deniability about their politics, about, oh yeah, I'm a lefty, I swear, I'm a lefty. When there was a plausible deniability there, they were more popular. But as soon as it became like the support for Trump became overt and apparent, then all of a sudden it's like the same thing happened with Dave Rubin. Like then people have zero interest in what they're selling because it went from, oh, they're a lefty who's criticizing Democrats and leftists and liberals all the time. That's really interesting. Let me see what they're saying. And then now it's like, here they are, Rescue the Republic, and they're doing some weird. Russell Brand was doing some weird public prayer. Every event he goes to now, he does some weird public prayer. He's
that dude loves to get in his tidy whities and
taking pictures in his tidy
be the
whities.
Center of attention.
Bro, he has not been in the allegations, taking pictures in his tidy whities and posting them on social media with him trying to baptize.
Bro, he hasn't been beating the allegations for about 4 years now.
That's right, yeah. So what do you make of that weird nexus of post-leftist and MAGA and like how sort of just pathetic it is?
I mean, we talk a lot about it on the channel. We've discussed it at length. And what I really do believe it is the end result of audience capture, specifically with someone like Jimmy Dore, because Jimmy, I think he really got distracted by the shiny object that was the vaccine, the anti-vax grift. He probably made a ton of money off of that. It's what got his channel over 1 million subscribers. It was, I think, around the similar time that your channel, Kyle, was kind of declining in viewership. It was that weird time after the Bernie era had ended, and it was like, I guess, where's the energy at right now? Nobody knows. The principled people like yourself, you kind of stuck the course. I'm going to stay principled and say what I believe, regardless of whether or not it's making me a ton of money or getting a ton of views. But Jimmy, again, can't handle the waning attention, so goes for this anti-vax grift, makes a ton of money. But that's a fleeting moment. That's a couple years at most, and it's basically over now. Unfortunately, what I talk about when I say the end result of audience capture is that there's an interesting sort of, irony here. Donald Trump, the person that most of these anti-vax people support, is the guy who did Operation Warp Speed. He's the one who did the lockdowns. He's the one who didn't fire Fauci like they would have liked him to, right? He's the guy responsible for all this stuff that they've spent the last couple of years pretending is the most evil, nefarious conspiracy that's ever been inflicted on the people of this country, right? But now all of a sudden, Donald Trump should be back in charge, and no one's addressing the fact that he was the one responsible for all that stuff that you just spent 2 or 3 years hand-wringing about and pearl clutching about and, raising the alarms. It's absolutely crazy. And again, a lot of them won't go full Trump. I think Jimmy, he won't straight up put on the MAGA hat, and it leaves him in this weird position where it's like, you got to kind of go all the way or not at all. And
Yeah,
you
but
can't
I
just
have
be
to say-
halfway off the cliff.
I do have to point out, though, because I saw this clip floating around social media, he made a very clear argument that he thinks Donald Trump is, and I quote, out-lefting Kamala Harris, which is literally the single dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard anywhere on the internet, in real life, etc. I don't think it's possible for an honest human being to believe that, to feel that way. Any objective analysis of their policies, what they say they want to do, what they've done in the past, etc., any objective analysis is going to say Kamala Harris is a corporate centrist liberal and Donald Trump is a fucking fascist, right?
Yeah.
So Crystal, maybe you can weigh in on this. Like, what is it? I don't think you can if you're being honest, you can't make that point. So it's obviously a grift. It's obviously, I'm going to hop on this contrarian bandwagon and do my whole tap dance about how what does it all come down to? What's the connecting tissue? We hate Democrats. We hate liberals. Like, that's the main connecting tissue between the Russell Brands, the Jordan Petersons, the Jimmy Dores, et cetera. Right?
Yeah.
It's also the most sought after content on YouTube.
Correct. And it is like, yeah, your entire politics are just, I hate liberals. Like, that's your whole politics. And so if Republicans are in opposition to liberals, then, hey, let me put on the MAGA hat. Let me be there. And there's something else that's happening here too. Naomi Klein gets at it in her book Doppelganger. I don't know if you guys read it, which talks about, like, she gets confused for Naomi Wolf, who's another one of these figures who went from being like prominent feminist and advisor to Al Gore to now being, a close associate of Steve Bannon and being all in on all the anti-vax stuff and all that crap. And she gets into some of that. I also heard Ezra Klein talking about a crank realignment, which is like, the anti-vax people used to be on the left. They were like the
hippies.
Yeah, it was RFK Jr. And it was like, it was this very hippie, like, oh, I don't want to put anything unnatural in my body.
Right.
Gwyneth Paltrow,
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's who it was.
Jenny McCarthy. Yeah.
There was a lot of like Hollywood,
Hollywood.
Wealthy Hollywood
Apple.
liberals who got super crunchy and got super conspiratorial about vaccines and other things. And now that group is one of the primary components of this weird horseshoe and RFK Jr., Russell Brand, like they're sort of some of the chief figures. I mean, RFK Jr. is one of the leaders of the anti-vax movement in America. So I do think he's emblematic
very much, Crystal.
I do think he's emblematic of some of that shift. But part of what I think is going on is, if you look at the polling, on the right, there's just zero institutional trust left. And so, they just have become completely unmoored, where all you have to do is say, like, the mainstream media won't tell you blah, 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 blah.
Right, or the establishment, blah, and then it's like anything
anything that you
that,
say after that, then they're ready to believe.
That's right. Good point.
And so it's like, yeah, okay, we've got a critique of the pharmaceutical industry, Lord knows, but that doesn't mean that the mainstream media is hiding from you the fact that, ivermectin is going to solve all your problems or whatever the fuck, which is also pharmaceutical. But so there's still more trust among people who are left of center in institutions that keeps them somewhat moored in reality. And so as you have this increasing spiral into just the most deranged conspiracies, like that Hurricane Helene was engineered by George Soros and Democrats to specifically target Republicans in, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Like, as you spin into those things, then you're going to be a magnet for the greatest cranks and the most unmoored people, regardless of where they exist on the political spectrum.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.